absolutely obsessed with the history of this town. Okay, now before we get started, I like to give a good contextual history of the building because this building is part of the museum itself. Okay, it was a hotel built in the 1800s by a very rich man named Henry Flagler. He was the second richest man in the 1800s, next to Rockefeller. In fact, him and Rockefeller were business partners in Standard Oil. Even more so, it was Rockefeller's name and all of Henry Flagler's hard work. Okay, now Flagler was born to a very poor family. His dad was a Presbyterian minister, and at the age of 14, him and his stepbrother were sent to Ohio to go work in a general store. There he meets his first wife, Mary Harkness. They get married and they have 3 kids. Now his first daughter passes away from pulmonary tuberculosis. And at that point he takes his savings plus a small loan from his father-in-law and he makes an investment into grain. Why? Because people like to drink. So he made a lot of money, right? But when the Civil War broke out, the government comes to him and Rockefeller and asks both of them to make investments in salt. Why? Because the government was buying salt by the pound to preserve meat on the battlefield for the soldiers. And they did. They made a little bit of money. But after the Civil War ended, that market tanked. And with the coins they had left, they invested into oil and made $1 bajillion overnight. Okay? A number we can't even fathom today. Well, at this point, his wife has tuberculosis, and the only treatment for that back then is coming down to the warm climate in the winter months to alleviate the pain. And they would come down here, and they would enjoy St. Augustine. It was super podunk back then, not much going on. Okay, a lot of rundown buildings. There was one really nice hotel called the St. Francis Hotel, which is the present-day parking garage. Well, when his wife passes away in 1881, he decides he wants to semi-retire. What does that mean? Get out of the oil industry and start investing in railways and hospitality. So the first thing he does is he buys all the light rail carts the light railways from DC all the way here to St. Augustine. And the light railways are the ones with the push carts on them, right? And he builds a grand railway coming all the way here to St. Augustine and opens up 2 hotels. The first one was the Ponce de Leon across the street. Now during construction, he was looking across the street to over here, and he saw a nasty swamp. And he's like, my guests are not going to be paying $1 million to look at a swamp. So he built this hotel as the Overflow Hotel, okay? They have a lot of common aspects to them, but also some stark differences. The common ones are pretty cool though. Like they were both designed by Hastings and Carrera, who after this went on to design the Library of Congress, the New York Public Library, and the Museum of Natural History in New York City. Louis Comfort Tiffany did all the interior decor for both buildings. In fact, he left his calling card on our 2nd floor ceiling, that Tiffany blue color. Okay? In fact, when his sons started Tiffany & Co., they got the idea for their blue boxes from their father's calling card. Thomas Edison, Henry Flagler was charged $50,000 to wire this building for electricity. Okay? We are the first public buildings to have electricity 3 years before the White House saw any. Okay? Now, who else? That's pretty much it. Anyway, now the differences are pretty insane. Now across the street was mostly for those coming out of the Victorian era, some old money that just want to sit around and have their tea and gossip, right? This one was more for like the millennials of the 1800s, the ladies who want to show their ankles and dance a little bit. Okay. Now to stay across the street, the very first season that was open, you couldn't just walk up to the front door and ask for a room. You had to be invited by Henry Flagler, and you had to be on the New York Social Registry list, which is a very, very short list of rich white men. Okay, and then the way it cost to stay over there is you couldn't just pay for a night, you couldn't just pay for a week. You had to pay for the entire winter season upfront in cash. In today's money, that's about 10 to 20 grand. And to stay here, though, was a little bit different. Okay, you could pay for a night, you could pay for a week and all that jazz. It cost $3.50 a night to stay here. In today's money, it's about $94. That's still a really good deal because that included your breakfast and your dinner in that price. Right? So it's kind of like being on a cruise boat. Okay? Now, across the street was really boring. There was nothing to do. This is where all the fun stuff was. So when you guys walked in the main courtyard, those are the hotel rooms. This area that we're in right now, this was the kitchen and the bakery, and the dining rooms are actually right now the present day outside where the fountains are. Okay? And then the whole back area where the rest of the museum is, that's the casino. And a casino back then is not a gambling place, it's more so like a spa, with swimming pools and saunas and ice plunges, those kinds of things, okay? Now, we're hotels all up until the Great Depression, okay? Well, the Great Depression shuts us down in 1932, this building. That hotel stayed open. Henry Flagler, he passed away in 1913. He was 83 years old and fell down the stairs in his home in South Florida and broke his hip. His money goes to his third wife, Mary Lily Keenan, who was 37 years younger than him. He did have a second wife, Ida Alice, but if you want to hear about her, you gotta take a nighttime tour, because she's crazy. Okay? She attempted murder twice, yeah. He had 2 other kids though. Jenny Louise passed away at the age of 30 through complications of childbirth. Henry was so distraught that he built a church in her memory. That's Flagler Memorial Presbyterian behind Flagler College, where Henry's buried, his first wife, his daughter, his granddaughter, and there's an empty tomb that we think is for his son Harry. Harry's a bit of a dandy, or like a punk rocker of the day, okay? He wants to play his violin and travel. His dad's like, no, you need a real job. Well, they get to a huge argument. An argument that is so bad that at 26 years old, Harry disowns his father. They never speak ever again. Harry does well for himself though. He goes up to New York City, meets Carnegie. Carnegie becomes his sugar daddy, and he builds him Carnegie Hall, and he becomes first chair violinist for the New York Philharmonic Orchestra till 1910, and then the director of that orchestra till 1928. So he does well for himself, right? So his third wife, Mary Lily Keenan, takes the money with her brother Robert Keenan, and they invest it in the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and they start the Keenan School of Business. Okay, now. During the Great Depression, there's a dude named Otto Lightner. Otto makes his fortune by buying failing newspapers and magazines, flipping them, making them profitable, and then selling them off. His most famous magazine was Hobbies magazine, and then during the Great Depression, he had no money in the stocks, but his friends did. So to help them out, he would buy their private collections, and he would store them in his mansion in Chicago. Well, he filled his entire home up, so he bought the mansion next door and filled that up too. In 1944, he was diagnosed with lymphomic cancer, came down here to recover from some heavy treatments. He was standing across the street and looked over at this empty building. He saw that it was for sale by the city for $150,000, which you know he bought it because it cost Henry Flagler in the 1880s $2.5 million. That's not inflation, that's how much he spent on the building in the 1880s. So even more so, he made the city put down $25,000 of that, so only paid $125,000 for this whole building. In 1948, he turned this into a museum, and he passed away in 1950 before he could put an endowment on this building. So we are a privately funded, nonprofit organization that has no endowment on this building, so we strictly run off of your ticket sales. So thank you so much for joining us today, okay? Now, we're going to start over here with this dude. This is the Nickelodeon from 1924. The term Nickelodeon is a fusion of 2 words. One, nickel, because it cost a nickel to play this thing, and Odeon, which is a French word meaning orchestral hall or opera house. So any form of entertainment in the early 20th century, whether you go see a live performance, see a movie, America about the mid to late 1800s, and same concept as the roll of paper or the metal disc. It has this wooden cob on the front here, but just reversely engineered. Has these staples protruding from it, so as it turns, those staples are going to hit those mallets there, making this sound, okay? Now this retailed when it came out for $6.50, which is still a little bit of money considered the average wage back then was $1.35 a week. Okay, so you could save up for one of these. They were mostly used in churches, and they would play hymns on these, and they would have to use this instead of a choir. Now when Sears got a hold of these in 1900, they started mass producing them about half the cost. You can get a machine for about $3.25, a cob for 12 cents, or 12 cobs for $2.38. Okay? I'm going to play one of these on steroids. This big dude behind me. The straight piano, or barrel piano, invented in England in the early 1800s and not very popular. Why? Because this hand crank was super heavy and it was not very ladylike or gentlemanlike to work up a sweat. So they found their way over to Italy where they were all the rage, and the Italian immigrants brought them over here to America around the turn of the 20th century. And they were played all over the major parks of the Northeast, like Central Park and all that. Now the cob that goes inside is 10 times bigger than that. This big guy right here. Okay? This is 150 pounds of solid wood, and it takes 2 people to load it in here. Okay? Now, You couldn't just buy one of these. You have to rent one of these from a music shop and then take it around the park. Are you guys familiar with the scene with the old man when the monkey goes around collecting coins while he plays the music box? This is what they would have used. Okay, you would rent one of these for about 10 cents and the cart separately for about 3 cents, and you would go around the park and make money for the day. Now the thing about this though, you don't just press a button and it plays the song. You have to control it the entire time, and because of that, it gives you the ability to improvise and change the song up a little bit. Otherwise, if you just listen to the same song every day, all day, you'd probably go crazy. Okay? Alright, so every time I play this, I like to jazz it up a bit, so we'll see what happens. Alright, here we go. Baby's a little old. It's from 1900. Okay, sounds like a middle school band.